Right, this is a review of chapter 13 in Mounce. You're going to be dealing with two things here. One would be the demonstrative adjective, and then the other, there are two forms of that. The other is the vocative case. And that is very simple. It's something you learn as you go along. So not a lot of new information here in this chapter. Note first of all, if you will, the exegetical insight that always is going to be a little help to you. May help you somewhere along the line in translation where you have a question. Remember to read the overview. Remember to note the English because it does help you with English grammar, which also helps you with Greek grammar. And then starting at 13.3, he introduces the demonstrative adjective or demonstrative pronoun. It functions as both a pronoun as an adjective. Now the main thing to note about this and get in your mind is that there are two forms of this. One that denotes the near demonstrative, and the other that denotes the remote demonstrative. Now that sounds kind of fancy, but it's really not that difficult to think about. This is near. That is remote. And that's what these two forms are. Hutas is near. That's this. And then ekanos, which we'll get to a little bit later on the next page, is that. That's remote. So just be sure to notice that. The good news is you've already learned the forms. It's the asu, oan, ace, ain, a, u, o, a ending. So there are three forms of it: masculine, feminine, and neuter, but they are pretty straightforward. If you turn to page 108 and section 13.5, you'll see the remote forms, and that is ekanos for the masculine, ekane for the feminine, and then ekana for the neuter. So just look at those forms. They're the same endings, so that should help you too. If you learn the basic vocabulary, hutas, haute, hauta, and then for the remote, ekanos, ekane, ekana. And once you do that, you've already learned the endings. So you just apply the first and second declension endings, and you'll have all of your paradigm. Note in 13.6 the characteristics of the demonstrative pronoun, so just read what he says there on the form. And then in 13.7, as he talks about the use of the pronoun, 13.8, the use of the adjective. And as he says, there are a few cases in 13.9 where the demonstrative pronoun weakens in its force and functions as a personal pronoun. Not many of those. Context, I think, will show you where that is. In section 13.10, he talks about the vocative. The vocative is the case of direct address. So it's pretty obvious in context if you are speaking directly to somebody, whether you're using a name like John, you're addressing John directly, or you're addressing man or boys or girls or whatever it is. That's going to be in the vocative case. The form is very similar to the nominative, but it becomes very clear in the context that you're directly addressing someone, and that's really what you need to remember about that. Note the odds and ends on 13, 11, 12, and 13. He introduces you to another word, palus, which means much or many. There, take care to note that. Read the summary and remember how to use that as you go back over it. If you remember it, then move on. If you need to review it, then review it. Look at the vocabulary, and we're going to pronounce that. Be sure to learn your vocabulary. Be sure to remember to go back and review your vocabulary as well. The vocabulary, first one is gune, and the second one is dekasune, it's a very important word, and then dodeka, word 12, and then how to. This is a word that is kind of reflexive, and you want to learn that as well. And then the forms of the remote pronoun, which would be ekanas, and then hey, which means or than. You notice that it is written with a smooth breathing mark and an acute accent. And then kako, which is a combination of kai and ego. So that's kako and I. And then makarios, megas, polis, palus. You notice the similarity there, but also the distinctions in those words. And then pos and semeon. Semeon is the word that John uses, particularly instead of the word miracle. Note that you will have learned, when you learn this lesson, you will have learned 64.14% of the word occurrences in the New Testament. So be sure to look at that carefully, review it, learn the things that you need to learn. What I want you to do, particularly with the demonstrative pronoun, you already know the endings, review those to make sure that you've got those, and then make sure that you can recognize which is remote and which is near, and just recognize them in translation. Turn in your workbook to page 45, exercise 13, and we're going to take a look at what you're going to be doing there. You'll be doing the parsing. Remember, you can use whatever tools you have to do that. Make it a learning experience. Don't just lean on that as a crutch, but do that. Do your warm up exercise, because that just helps you to, the practice helps you. And then you are translating only 4 of the sentences. Sentence 4, 6, and 10. I'm sorry, that's 3, isn't it? 3 of the sentences, 4, 6, and 10. That's right. So we'll just do 4, 6, and 10. Look at sentence 4 if you can, and then you would see that. I'm going to read it literally. Out of the city, that one, many believed in him of the Samaritans through the word of the woman. That's the way that would be translated. So just take a look at that, and then translate those 3 sentences. And if you have the time, you may want to practice on a few more, because it certainly would be helpful to you. So make sure that you get these done and get them ready to turn in on Saturday night by midnight. Your quiz for this week is going to deal with chapters 12 and 13, which will be the vocabulary, particularly in those 2 chapters. And also you will need to note the forms of the third personal pronoun or adjective, as Mounce calls it, and then how to recognize the near and demonstrative pronouns. So follow the instructions in the syllabus for taking that quiz and get it in by Saturday night at midnight. Thank you. If you need anything, give us a call.